Okay, all right. We go in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, a very beautiful Friday afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Trifactor Engage in our weekly, or bi-weekly, I should say, podcast for Breakthrough in Action. You guys are just tuning in now, just to give you a quick heads up. So Breakthrough in Action is this new workshop series or this initiative under Trifactor Engage that we've created specifically for this time of uncertainty and adversity of COVID to bring the community together. So what we've done is we've partnered with an amazing network of global health professionals, including one that I will introduce to you in just a few moments. And luckily, with the support of the Singapore government, we've been able to put together a unique framework where we incorporate all of these practices from all of these practitioners, from coaches to PhDs in psychology, to wellness professionals, to doctors, you name it, we've got it. And we've put it together in a framework that allows you to bring it into a practical way into your lifestyle. And we're going to do it through community support. So if you want to know a little bit more about this initiative, please, it's all over our Facebook page. You can visit trifactor.asia/breakthrough and you'll be able to join this course. It's 100% free. So if you know of anyone, including yourself, who you think will benefit from a little bit of community support, some guidance, as well as some tools on how to not only overcome distress, but to be able to thrive through adversity and to be able to really create positive transformation in your well-being, you know where to find us. Having said that, I'm super stoked to be able to share our speaker or our guest with you today. I had the pleasure of meeting her a few months back during a workshop, actually, just when COVID had hit. And we had this community support group coming together, and she was able to share couple of really amazing techniques, which I love, because what she's going to be able to show you is to not only be able to manage the different stressors that you're experiencing, but how to use that as leverage with the practices that she gives you to actually bring flourishing into your well-being, into the way you show up in your day, the way that you feel energized and motivated and all of that good stuff. So I'm going to let her do all the talking. Guys, she is fantastic. She is a certified heart math practitioner. She's a doctor of functional wellness. She's a mentor. She's a coach. You name it, she does it. Ladies and gentlemen, Elle Lorenzo. Hi, Doc.
Hi. Good evening, everyone. Good afternoon, everyone.
All of it, whichever. Thank you so much for coming and joining us. I think that this is actually one of those messages or one of those podcasts that has a lot to offer when it comes to the practical tools that we can do at home. So Dr. Eca, can you just explain to us a little bit, well, for those of us who don't know, what is heart math?
Okay, so heart math it really started as a research institute looking at heart patterns and heart rhythms. And they've come together and put a lot of different tools and techniques that help you to regulate your emotions and intelligently manage your energy. That's the short version of it. I mean, there's a lot going on with heart math.
Yeah,
but that's the short version.
That's good. You mentioned something about, regulating our emotions. And I know that this is one of the points that we'll discuss in a little bit. I think it's one of those things for those of us who are new to the practice, we say, well, how do you regulate your emotions? It's not like I have a dial on my chest where I can just be like, I'm getting a little swept away over here. It's not that easy. It's something so ambiguous, that's not tangible. Like, how do I sit? Like, the practice doesn't make sense sometimes, when you hear people talk about mindfulness and meditation, and I was like this at first. I think about it and I'm like, well, that sounds all well and good, but it doesn't, where's the science? Where's the proof? And I think that's exactly what you're going to be able to show, is that we are able to regulate our emotions with these specific practices, and you're able to measure it. So what is the form of measurement where you can see that it's actually not just, you can actually see the progress and the tracking?
Well, we use biofeedback tool. We monitor heart rate variability, and I'll show that later on, how just our breathing can shift our heart's rhythm. But I want to latch on to something that you said, where like you're saying about meditation, and you don't know how to like do it in real time. usually a lot of people think about meditation and it's, it's stereotyped, like you have to find a quiet place, sit down, close your eyes, uh, and empty your mind, right? And what's the science behind that? And there's a lot of science behind it. But the main reason that I got into heart math was it gave me a way to present these practices in a very clinical manner. So for the people who aren't, going to buy into the meditation the way it's been stereotyped, then they have the solid science behind why these practices work. The other thing is, unlike meditation, you don't need to find a quiet place to do the techniques of heart math. In fact, they're meant to be done in the moment with your eyes open, right? It's not something where you need to step away and just focus on doing that. You can do it, in when you're having the panic attack, or when you're having a heated argument, or when you're waiting for the elevator or in the bathroom. It doesn't matter, because it uses very simple techniques.
Fantastic. And it's a real life skill that we can take wherever we need it and whenever we need it. And I think that especially during these times, there's a lot of uncertainty going around and isolation especially. So we have a lot of these moments throughout the day, these different pockets that could really use this intervention. Now, before we explain, or have you explain what the intervention is and what the science behind it is, can you explain a little bit about your philosophy on what it's like to cope with stress? Is it a gift that we're born with, or is it is it a skill that we actually have to intentionally utilize and harness?
Yes, I like that term. It's a skill, definitely. And okay, let me try and. So how people how people describe us Filipinos as being resilient.
Yeah.
In the face of everything, like yearly major typhoons and all of these different disasters, and we're resilient. And it's like it's a trait, right? Mm-hmm. We're like we were saying, you were born with it. But really, building resilience is a skill, and coping with stress is a skill, which means whether or not you're good at it, you can become good at it. And if you're already good at it, you can become better. And it has something to do with learning how to regulate your emotions, which we will dive into deeper later.
Actually, yeah, let's dive into it a little bit now. I think because that's a really interesting a statement to say, regulate your emotional. It's because it's something that we can't see, and it's just something that we feel, and we're often controlled by it. So what does it mean to regulate our emotions, and how can we do it? Obviously there's a lot of different moving factors, like our hormones, and maybe you can talk about what is it that, if we're going to talk about the science behind the practice, what is it that makes these emotions happen, and what is it that makes these emotions sweep us off our feet habitually?
Where do we start? First things off.
Big question.
Regulating emotions. The meaning of life. You're saying, how do we do that? No one teaches us how to do that, right?
Oh.
Like as kids, we go to school, we learn the mental skills, whether it's algebra or reading or writing, and then we have physical ed, which helps us learn about the physical body. But no one really teaches us about emotions. It's something we pick up, how we express our emotions, how we deal and cope with emotions. It's something that we just pick up, watching the people around us, or watching TV and how people react, and all of the different stereotypes, like men shouldn't cry, and women are wishy-washy, all of these different stereotypes. But really, emotional regulation is about managing your energy. So I'm not talking about suppressing emotions. Some people might think regulating your emotion means suppressing them, right? In the way that you suppress a bad emotion. Can you give me an example of a bad emotion?
Imagine a bad emotion for me would be like when I wake up in the morning and I had all these plans of the things I want to do, but I just feel no energy and no motivation. And then as a result, I stay in bed, and then I just feel even more shame or just this guilt. And the more I don't have emotion, the more I don't have motivation. I don't know what you call that. It's just the feeling of meh.
Okay, that's a new emotion, meh. But yeah, like you mentioned some negative emotions like shame and guilt, and basically they drain you, right? You haven't started your day, but if you're feeling that, you're drained of your energy.
Mm-hmm.
Can you describe like a good emotion?
A good emotion, if we're gonna go from that to the opposite, would be feeling zestful and excited and motivated.
Okay, so we tend to, and what does that make you feel? Like you're excited, you're full of energy, you wanna,
Yeah, when I
jump
feel
out of bed.
when I'm excited, I feel like I'm capable of more things. I feel more optimistic about my day. I feel, more vibrancy, and I notice I'm more grateful and appreciative of things when I'm full of energy and excitement.
Yeah. And do you think these are states that we can generate on purpose?
Yes.
Yeah. Because a lot of people, we grow up and we think that emotions are reactions and results,
Hmm.
and we tend to forget that we can actually generate emotions. And emotional regulation is really just maybe I should share. Let me share a visual aid that'll help us reframe the way we think of emotions.
That would be great. Yeah.
Right. Giving you the science behind it. So a lot of people tend to just think emotions are something that we have absolutely no control
Yeah.
of.
And I think it's one of those things. It's like what you said, when you're a kid and you grow up and you don't really know, we're not taught how to deal with emotions. We think it's just something that happens. And, unfortunately, maybe the adults around us, they didn't even know how to, how to actually regulate or what it was. A lot of this new, scientific data is coming in now, how we can actually, practice and exercise our ability to rewire our brains over practice and time. So, oh, excellent.
So no one taught us to think of emotions this way, right? And how they affect our body. Something I want, how we always discuss like physical health, you have to be physically healthy and emotionally healthy.
Yes.
And emotions are physical. They're one and the same thing, emotional health and physical health. Because where do we feel our emotions? How do you know when you're feeling scared? Right? Usually
my body has it shows itself physiologically. If I get tense up, my breathing,
sweaty hands, your heart rate comes up, your breathing becomes shallower. And how do you know when you're feeling happy?
I feel
happy. How do you know someone's happy? Elated. Right? There's a smile on your face.
They have energy. All of a sudden, their body is full of movement. Yeah.
Exactly. So emotions are physical. There is no removing the emotions from the body. Right? Now, they've shown that depending on what emotion you're feeling, there's a different hormonal response. And you can see on the screen that x-axis where it says hormonal response, and that the emotions that we tend to judge as being negative, like frustration, anger, they tend to release, you release more cortisol, which is a stress hormone. And there's a whole cascade of different effects of having a lot of cortisol all the time. So cortisol is not bad per se. It's actually a survival hormone. We need it. It spikes in the morning because it wakes us up. Right? So we need that. But too much of it, it's too high all the time, then that's going to be a problem.
Can you explain real quick, when you say it cascades into a lot of different things, is it other hormones that you experience? So if you have cortisol and you are on that fight or flight response constantly without any intervention or any break or any recovery, what does that do physiologically or biologically to the body and to the brain?
So let's maybe take let's dissect that a bit. Like you said, the fight or flight response. So for example, a lion was running after you, or a tiger, or some predator was running after you. right? Adrenaline comes up, right? So that and that makes your heart rate speed up, so that you're pumping more blood to the periphery, to your muscles, because you're getting ready to run away or fight.
Yeah.
That, let's see, your blood actually, it tends to become like thicker or more easily, it'll coagulate more easily. You'll form blood clots more easily. And the reason for that is if the predator, got to take a bite out of you, you need your blood to clot really fast. Because if you get away but you bleed to death, then there's no point, right? It shuts down. The blood flow goes to your periphery, and the blood flow to your internal organs is significantly decreased. So, for example, the blood supply to your liver or to your digestive tract, because the functions of these organs aren't important in the immediate moment where you just need to survive, right?
Yes.
So nothing about digesting food and absorbing the nutrients. The liver, this will not detoxify any toxins or do any metabolism. The reproductive tract, like, you are not making offspring until you're sure you're going to survive, right? Survival first.
Yes.
And then reproduction and growth and all of the other things. So if you're always in a fight or flight mode and you have high cortisol, then all of these different things happen. And the research shows that you actually, what do you call this? Your brain actually shrinks.
Okay.
Your brain shrinks.
Oh, wow.
So, and even the way that the brain functions is affected, because you're always activating those areas of the brain that are, again, to do with survival. So higher brain centers, the one to do with really judgment and the way we perceive things, personality, that takes a back seat. So survival is key.
It's kind of like that. There's a philosophy where, the reason why we're not able to, when we get when we're on that fight or flight response and we're really stressed out, all we can see in that tunnel vision is the problem. Everything else, we can't be productive. We can't be creative. We can't seem, for some reason, all of a sudden, that's all we can think of, and we can't pull ourselves out of it. So the truth of the matter is that there's actually this physical or biological, frenzy that's happening within us, that our body or our brain, because of this cortisol, is stealing all the focus. It's stealing all the energy, that we can't do whatever we're usually able to do. So then does that mean that if we can control or manage our stress, so we're not always in this state of fight or flight, that we're not only going to be able to feel relief from that stress, but we're actually going to be better at our jobs, better at our relationships, better at everything else?
So you're going to perform better. It's called, so when we're in a stress mode and there's a lot of cortisol, there's something called cortical inhibition. So, which is cortex is the brain, and you're inhibiting the proper functioning. They say don't make any decisions when you're mad. Like, count to 10 before you speak. And when I'm sure all of us have at one point or another done something we regretted. You can say, oh, because I couldn't think straight, or I saw red, and that literally is true. You really couldn't think straight. The heart's rhythm sends, did you know that the heart sends about more information to the brain than the brain sends to the heart? About 80% of the communication between our heart and our brain is coming from the heart to the brain. And they've shown that depending on the rhythm of your heart, then that can facilitate, again, cortical functioning or cortical inhibition.
Okay, so we can actually, we can have these different practices as these hacks to hack, well, essentially hack into the brain by manipulating how the heart is reacting in a specific situation.
You could put it that way. The other way to think of it is, for people are thinking, well, I know how to control my stress and I don't need these things. And these techniques don't only work for coping with stress, but you can actually improve your performance, whether that's at your job, or a sport that you enjoy, or even in relationships, in dealing with people. Like for parents who are dealing with makulit kids, it really, really, or dealing with your spouse. So it applies to all the different aspects of our life. It's not just about stress.
Hmm.
So let me just go back to this grid. So it's called the depletion to renewal grid or plan. And I like to think of it as your emotional landscape.
Your
Right?
emotional
So again,
landscape.
so it's
I like
giving
that.
us a framework to look at our emotions. Like we're not just, we feel our emotions and then what?
Yes.
Right? Most of us, we feel our emotions and either we're carried away by it
Yes.
or we suppress them because they're not good.
Hmm.
Right? And we immediately have value judgments about these emotions, whether they're usually, it's always, so this is bad. I'm angry, this is bad.
And I think this is why, I'm so glad that we have you on this podcast right now, because sometimes it just takes the understanding or the knowledge that, oh, guess what? Like my emotions aren't actually who I am.
Yeah.
And a lot of the times when we associate ourselves with these emotions, that's what continues this, perpetual self-perpetuating spiral of shame, because like, oh, what's wrong with me? I always feel this, I can't feel this. And it always ends up to what's wrong with me, what's wrong with me. But if we can just have a better understanding that, our emotions and sometimes even our thoughts, are not part of us, that it's something that is biologically wired within us, then we can
Yes.
not only have compassion on ourselves, but we can say, okay, at the end of the day, this is still my body. I have a choice to engage in whatever comes up. And of course, this takes practice. I still am in the point where I can feel super zen and super centered and be like, I can handle everything. And then some random thing happens, like my phone gets lost and all of a sudden I can't think straight. The world is falling apart.
Yeah.
This happens on a regular basis. So it's like as you said, like that practice.
So I just want to point out something you said. It's wired.
Yeah.
You're saying something about it being biologically wired into us. And that's so true. So again, science behind it, whatever you constantly experience repeatedly, whether it's a physical action or an emotional reaction, that really does get wired into us. You're an athlete,
Yes.
right? I know people are pretty aware that athletes train. And basically, what is training? It's repeating the same thing over and over again. And so, for people who are always stressed, stress is actually a habit, and they've trained themselves how to be stressed because they keep activating that neural circuit, strengthening those neurons that fire together. It's just saying, we say the neurons that fire together wire together.
Mm.
So, also people have knee-jerk reactions,
Yes.
maybe to a person who irritated them once, and then after that, they always get irritated whenever they see that person, or, things become hardwired. So stressing can be a habit, and it may sound weird, but for some people, they're so used to being in that stress state
Mm.
that helping them or making them shift to a non-stress state actually feels weird for them. It
Absolutely.
feels uncomfortable for them, and you might think, really, they want to be in a stress state.
Mm.
But some people are always looking for something to
Yes. So why is
stress
that?
over.
Yeah.
If it's not one thing, it's another thing. They're never content. They find something, and that's also can be because it's. I know in one of the previous talks, you talked about homeostasis,
Mm.
and for some people, that's their normal. They're in a stress state.
Wow.
So
And
it takes practice, a lot of
what
practice.
is it that's keeping from people because they're more comfortable in that stress state? Is it because it's what they're certain of and we are always just afraid of the unknown, of something we've never tried before or experienced?
It's literally their body's used to that level of it's trying to make sure I get the science right. But So it has something to do with hormones and neurotransmitters. And I don't want to be too technical, but like with a, you're making this hard for me.
I know I'm squeezing the science out of you, but yeah, no, go ahead. So with the, I understand that, you know, the science behind it, when we get into the stressful state, and that becomes our homeostasis. That's kind of like
your normal
baseline,
yeah,
where the body is just used to working in that, you know,
and it feels it's
level of warmth.
think of okay, I know. Okay, let me try and give you an analogy.
Yes.
And go back to the slide, the visual aid that we have. That y-axis, that vertical axis, it says ANS and arousal. So ANS stands for autonomic nervous system, and it's basically the nervous system that's in charge of everything that's automatic and we have no control over. So, you know, if whenever you get startled, you don't need to kind of think, okay, my heart rate has to speed up. Everything happens immediately. I mean, automatically. The same way with when we're eating, we don't tell our stomach, okay, you know, we're gonna start digesting now, release the digestive enzymes. It kind of happens automatically as well. So this autonomic nervous system has two hands, let's just say two arms or two hands. The sympathetic nervous system is in charge of the stress response and survival. And again, that's a crucial, we need that. We cannot live without that. And then the parasympathetic is in charge of rest, relaxation, restoration. So that's when healing happens, when we're in a parasympathetic state, growth. And you can think of these two as your left and right hand. And ideally, we're ambidextrous, meaning we know how to use both, like when it's needed. Right? But a lot of people, let's say there are a lot of people who are right-handed, and let's say that the right hand is a sympathetic nervous system, and you use it a lot, over and over. And then the left hand is your parasympathetic, and you don't use it a lot. So for right-handed people, brushing their teeth with their left hand feels weird, right? Using that left hand feels weird, and they're clumsier with it.
Yeah.
Right? It's not as finessed.
Yeah.
And even if you look at some people, you can look at their hands and the muscles on their arms, and you can tell if they're left or right-handed because the muscles are more developed on the dominant hand. And the same way with the autonomic nervous system. If we're always using the sympathetic nervous system, then the parasympathetic nervous system isn't as well trained, so to speak. So it's another way to think of your emotions is looking at them on the scale of, is this emotion making me highly aroused? And aroused meaning, you know, you're in a highly sympathetic state.
Yes.
You're in an alert state, you're in survival mode. Versus is this emotion, you know, there's not much arousal involved with it. And you can see examples on the circle, right?
Yes.
So sadness is tends to be a draining emotion, but it doesn't get your heart rate up.
Yeah.
It doesn't get your blood pressure up, right? And I like this grid very much because it gives us a way to look at emotions and stress as well, that it's not just about being stressed and then knowing how to relax.
Yeah.
Because you can be happy, which is a renewing, positive emotion, but it is an aroused emotion, right? So you're not relaxed. Or excitement if you won something, or you know it, or you're playing with your kids. That's not a relaxed state. So stress isn't just about learning to relax.
Yes.
There's so much more to it than that. And this is one of my favorite tools in HeartMath because it gives you just a way to start looking at your emotions and again managing them intelligently. So for example, if you're in a state of, let's just say, anger, someone said something which ticked you off and you're angry, and so you know that you are in a state of sympathetic arousal, you're in a stress state, and everything else that happens in a stress state, you know, you have higher BP, your blood is more coagulable, or it'll clot easier. Your heart rate is beating faster, which takes up energy. It uses up energy. The heart is a muscle. And then you're also releasing cortisol.
Yes.
Right. And so usually when we're angry, we either suppress it or we tell someone else about it, right? Because we want someone on our side. So either you post on Facebook and someone else comments and, and it just perpetuates that feeling of anger. And now you're feeling it's righteous anger because, I was right. All these people are saying I am, it's right that I'm angry. But if you look at it intelligently, what good does it do you to keep staying angry? After allowing yourself to feel that anger, after acknowledging that, yes, this is how this made me feel.
Yes.
You then have a choice to, okay, do I want to keep feeling it? Do I want to keep telling everyone else I meet and texting all my friends and finding someone to side with me?
Yeah.
Because emotions, the body doesn't know that we're re-experiencing emotions. I mean, in the moment you feel something and you have a physiological reaction to it, and then afterwards, even if you're just recalling it or remembering, your body doesn't know you're just remembering. It's still going through that physiological reaction.
Wow.
Right. So you can, at least if you have this framework, think, okay, so I'm pretty sure I'm not going to be able to shift into like a positive emotion right away. But what about, let me just calm down that sympathetic arousal. Let me calm down and shift to a lower state of arousal. Let me get my heart rate down and my BP down. Right. And that at least already starts saving you energy because your heart doesn't need to beat so fast. I don't know.
So what practices can you, or a simple takeaway for someone to, because you said it's, arousal can be in anger, anxiety, or even happiness and excitement. So too much of one thing will leave the body unbalanced or leave the autonomic nervous system imbalanced. So are you saying that even when we are extremely excited, or when the nervous system is always excited throughout the day, that we need to be able to develop that balance by incorporating a practice to bring our sympathetic nervous system down and to fortify our parasympathetic nervous system?
Yes, and to manage your energy. Because at the end of the day, it's about energy. Sorry?
And how would you do that, Doc?
So, okay, let's start with the fundamental, like the most basic heart math technique, and it's a simple breathing technique. And because it's so simple, let me share how it can actually shift a heart rhythm. So I'm going to clip myself. I'm going to attach my biofeedback probe so that people can see my heart rhythm hopefully change. Okay. And I'm going to ask you to do this with me. Maybe before we do this, I want you to think of an adjective, and everyone else who's watching, just think of an adjective that will describe how you're feeling right this moment. Let's see if we can shift that.
All right.
So do you mind sharing what that adjective is?
Curious.
Curious. Okay. And mine is still kind of jittery from the nerves. Okay. So, and what you're seeing on the screen, that line, this is my heart rhythm. Okay, so it's not my heart rate. That's a different thing. That's what we see when people go for an ECG in the hospital or in a lab. So this is heart rhythm. And let's just go ahead and do the technique. So and maybe we can do this with our eyes closed.
Okay.
Just so it's not weird staring at the screen and we're not getting distracted. And then halfway, somewhere along the way, I'm going to ask you to open your eyes, but continue doing the technique. Because again, the techniques are meant to be done in the moment. They're not something where you need to step away from your life, from real life to do them. So, but let's close our eyes. And I just want you to focus your attention in the area of your heart. And just imagine your breath flowing into and out from your heart area. Breathing a little slower and a little deeper than your usual. If it helps, you can put your hand over your heart area to help you bring your attention there. And you can count 5 seconds for your inhale, 5 seconds for your exhale. Again, if that will help, or just follow whatever breathing pattern is comfortable for you. And if your focus begins to wander, any thoughts come in, just bring your attention back to the area of your heart. Just imagine your breath flowing into and out from your heart area. And I'm going to ask you to open your eyes, but still keeping your focus in your heart area, and continuing to imagine your breath flowing into and out from your heart area. Okay, and you see how the tracing changed. The first part where it's just jagged lines all over the place, me feeling jittery. And then you can see a bit, some smoothing out of the waves, a bit more of a regular pattern. Although because I've been talking, um, it's not as the sine wave that we would expect. But I like using this tool because it just shows usually the attendees in my workshops, they can see immediately how breathing, just the simple act of breathing and the different breathing patterns already affect the way your heart rhythm beats.
Excellent. Doc, could you explain real quick? So just for our viewers who are not very familiar with heart rate variability, obviously this is not, checking our pulse. This is being able to measure the variability or the distance between our sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous. Can you explain a little bit about how that balance is shown on this measurement?
So just and maybe I am going to let me stop that and share. I have a lot of visual aids to help people understand more, because it can be very technical.
Yes.
So the tracing down here is typically what we see on an ECG, right? So each spike is a heartbeat, and you're looking at several heartbeats over the span of several seconds. What the heart rhythm is looking at is how it's counting the intervals between those heartbeats. That's what it's tracking. So as your heart, the slower your heartbeat, the wider the space in between each beat, right? And the faster it is, the smaller the space.
Yes.
And that's what's being plotted. So let's say your heart rate is at 60, and then as you inhale, naturally as we inhale, our heart rate speeds up. And as we exhale, it slows down. Okay. That's called the respiratory sinus arrhythmia. But that's how it really should be. As you're inhaling, your heart rate is speed. You know how when we get surprised or startled, it's an intake it's a sharp inhale, right? It's a sharp intake of breath, and sometimes we hold it. We do that, right? And that's our heart rate speeds up. And when there's relief, it's an exhale, right? Sometimes it's a long exhale, and that slows our heart rate down. So heart rate variability is looking at the capability of your heart to go from beating at a low heart rate to a faster heart rate. And the higher your heart rate variability is, the better. Yeah, that means you have a healthier heart.
Are we able to regulate ourselves better with higher heart rate variability?
Yes, because that means you can go from a low heart rate to a high heart rate in a matter of a few seconds or a few breaths, and then you can calm down in a few breaths. So you can, the HeartMath Institute, and not just HeartMath Institute, but there's a lot of research about heart rate variability and how it can show you how healthy you are in general and how healthy your heart is. The older we get, the less heart rate variability we have. So, for example, I did this with my grandmother before she passed. She was 84, and her heart rate variability was like 3 beats per minute. She could go from 60 to 63. That's about it. And looking, she would always, whenever she would be worked up, like in an anxious state or whatever emotion she would have, it would take her a really long time to calm down.
Oh, bless.
And so the good news is you can actually increase your heart rate variability with training. The same way athletes, if you can run at the start, I can only run a half marathon. After more training, I can run an ultra marathon. Same thing. And then if you stop training, you kind of lose that ability. Mm-hmm. It's the same thing with the heart. The heart is the muscle.
So Dr. Eca, can you explain how it is that we're able to, we were able to do a very simple technique earlier about, focusing our awareness and our breath in the area of our heart. And we've shown that, you were able to calm yourself and you were able to see more heart rate variability. So what are other ways that we can manipulate this situation, especially when tensions are so high that sometimes simply breathing towards the area of our heart might just not cut it?
Actually, that the heart focused breathing is the easiest thing you can do. There are other techniques of HeartMath, but for example, there's something called the quick coherence technique where you do heart focused breathing and then you make a sincere attempt to experience, to really feel a renewing emotion, like maybe appreciation or gratitude or love. And that's really harder in the moment. If you remember the depletion to renewal grid, which yes. I think I should share again, but a lot of the time, so quick coherence will get you from this depleted high arousal part of the grid to a more renewing positive state. But in the heat of the moment, it will take practice for you to actually be able to shift.
Okay.
And sometimes all you can do is just decrease the arousal and go from sympathetic to parasympathetic, and the heart focused breathing will do that.
Can you explain the different steps of quick coherence test?
Quick coherence technique is just 2 steps where number 1 is heart focused breathing. You focus your attention in the area of your heart. Imagine your breath flowing into and out from your heart area, breathing a little deeper and a little slower than usual. And step 2 is you make a sincere attempt to actually feel a renewing emotion. So everyone has heard of think positive, right? And we tend to do that. Think positive, think positive. This takes it a step further. You think of something positive, but you want to feel that emotion, because it's the feeling that shifts your biochemistry. It's the actual feeling that shifts the physiology. And so it's very simple, but it's not really easy. What I want to remind people though is we are so used to doing this the opposite direction.
Yes.
Right? Like you can be in a perfectly okay, good state, and then you think of something that makes you feel bad.
Yeah.
Or you start worrying about something, and then you're shifting into this side of the grid, right?
Yes.
So we can do this. People generate emotions on, on demand or on purpose,
It just
inadvertently,
goes to show,
all the time.
it just goes to show how, obviously, because we've mentioned before that, our brains are hardwired by our biology and our psychology to analyze the past and the future and in order to survive. And so as a result, now when, we're not being chased by lions anymore, that mechanism is still within us. And so we start typhooning in other different ways. And because of that
Yeah.
habitual strategy, and also when, an uncomfortable thought or deficient feeling of deficiency arises, we tend to just, push it aside. And as a result of pushing it aside, we are actually enabling our habitual mannerisms of falling back into that spiral. So what you're saying, Doc, is now with these techniques intentionally done, because as you said earlier, it's so easy to just, oh, we can be in a good mood, then we think of a bad thought, and all of a sudden a bad emotion arises, because that's habitual. So now,
Yeah.
with these techniques, if we continually to intentionally practice it, then we can maybe shift that whole,
Yeah.
the whole mechanism with
Yeah.
practice. With practice.
So like with the analogy, if you start brushing your teeth with your left hand, after a couple of weeks, it's gonna feel, you're not gonna be as clumsy. It's gonna feel more natural. And after several months, then you can brush your teeth with either hand. Just do it. Just, it feels weird at the start. I usually, when I used to run these workshops live, that's always the question: is how am I going to generate a good feeling? Like, how's that possible? And I always tell them, you're so used to it the other way around.
Yes.
So quick coherence. Here's another way to look at things. These techniques help you to either do emotional refocusing. So we were talking about emotional regulation,
Yes.
and emotions um, are physical and they have a physiologic effect. And you can do either emotional refocusing. So if you're, in the moment feeling very distressed, then you want to shift that emotion. And it doesn't even have to be to a good emotion. You can just shift from being distressed to being neutral. Like, it's another one of the techniques or things that I learned with heart math is the power of neutral.
Yes.
It doesn't always have to be to a good thing.
Yes.
But just getting to a neutral place where, you're not going down that spiral of that negative emotion. And then there is emotional restructuring. And the restructuring happens not in the moment, but this is like the training that you need to do to rewire your brain, to rewire that habit, those neural circuits that you have trained and strengthened all of these years. And instead of being a good stressor, you become a girl that is being really good at champion stressor.
We are all champion stressors.
Yeah.
I love how you said, there's power in the neutral, because I think when we first did, with the first workshop that we ever were involved with together, one of my main concerns was like, well, if I'm doing this quick coherence technique and I'm refocusing my energy to a positive thought, am I running away from that negative emotion? Am I, trying to push it aside? But it's not even that. And it's like what you said, and I've been able to incorporate this into my practice, is like when we feel these emotions on the rise and the overwhelm, sometimes it's in our inherent, we want so badly to just fix that bad emotion and turn it into good rather than bring it back to neutral. And so we sometimes force ourselves, oh, I have to feel good, I have to feel better, why don't I feel better? And that continues to self-perpetuate. But the power of coming back to neutral, or even just like calming the nervous system and calming the heart rate, it's like what we said earlier, then our brains are not in that frenzy, and then our blood is able to pump, our heart is able to pump blood and oxygen and nutrients to the rest of the body. All of a sudden, that neutral is, yes, may not be super excited and elated, but it's back to baseline where we can start thinking clearly again. And then when we can start thinking clearly again, just bringing our heart rate down and calming the sympathetic nervous system, it's almost like, not almost, we access a higher frequency of thinking. And then we can go back to the negative emotion and think rationally rather than emotionally.
Perfect. Okay, so you did my job explaining that. Perfect.
So
exactly.
The structure thing, that's what I'm excited about, is because when you say, oh, we can actually learn to, change the way our neural pathways move, and we can change the wiring of our brain. What was that quote that you said? The neurons that fire together?
Neurons that fire together, wire together.
So how do we change that without going in there and having a
practice? Just with practice. Remember what I said earlier too, that whatever we're experiencing, that's activating the neural circuits. So if you take start with 1 minute once a day. Like, everyone get out their phones now and set an alarm. So I have an alarm on my phone that reminds me, okay, heart focused breathing or the coherence technique. And you just do it, once a day, 1 minute, and then build up. I've in some people, what do you call this? You can also, like, some people will do, I did this before when I finished my training. Every stoplight, or every time I was stopped in traffic, because you don't need a stoplight to be stopped in traffic, that would be my cue to just practice heart focused breathing or quick coherence. Or when you're waiting in line for the elevator, or now when we're waiting in line to get into a store because of all of the physical distancing. But the restructuring, so maybe it's easier if I tell a story. You know how traffic, so I took my training in 2015 and traffic was really bad. The Skyway 3 was just beginning.
Yes.
And my route to work then was the whole route of the Skyway 3. So traffic was really bad. And doing this technique, the drive to and from work became like a game. It became like, okay, I got triggered by this, whatever. I got triggered by this motorcycle cutting me, or this, Jeep taking up whatever, the lane. And it became a game. Every time I'd get triggered, I would do the technique.
Yes.
And because I have the benefit of having the biofeedback, so the machine would tell me when my heart rate rhythm had shifted.
Yes.
Then, it became kind of, okay, I did it that time. Right. And over several months, there'd be times when I would still have road rage. I used to have road rage and go after, the person who cut me. And I'd be like, oh shit, wait, no, I have to do the technique.
Yes.
And, and restructure. So it does take time. But, with practice, anything you do with practice, right? When we started as babies walking, we would trip, but now it's automatic. So it's practice, practice, practice.
I love that, like the 1 minute at a time. I think it's such a daunting thing for a lot of people to think of incorporating the practice. That's why a lot of times we never even start, because we measure ourselves against the finish line. It's like, oh, well, it's going to take me forever to do this. Yes, but you don't have to do forever right now. It's like 1 minute. And that's like, that is the framework of building habits, is starting super small that anyone can do it. And then the momentum takes care of itself. And I remember, I love when you use the analogy of playing a game, because so often we are hardwired to experience our emotions and our thoughts as ourselves. And as a result, there's this resistance because we don't want those thoughts or emotions. So why are we having them? And that creates such turmoil. But as we did this practice, what really helped me is when I wake up and I feel that that usual pump of anxiety, and I'm confused. I don't know what's happening. It doesn't feel like my body, doesn't feel like my brain. And then I remember just that thought of, okay, this is a game. So this is an opportunity to practice this now. Detach, try and detach yourself from what's actually happening. And okay, you want it to be better at this practice, here's your chance. So now, if we can somehow place ourselves in the seat of the observer rather than the actor who's in the middle of all the turmoil, but the observer who says, okay, what if I try this? Then what's my brain gonna do? Or what if I try this? Then and then all of a sudden, just that little action of putting yourself in the, all right, this isn't me. I'm going to try something here and I'm going to put this into practice. It's empowering and it just takes 1 or 2 tries, because when you realize that you can actually do that, then it registers biologically that, okay, so this is actually real, that I am not these thoughts, I am not these emotions. Yeah. And the more we do that, the more the body and the brain becomes aware of that disassociation. And then it becomes, not to say that stress isn't going to happen, where I'm like, no. It took like however many decades of conditioning to get us this way. It's going to take a long time to reverse it, but it becomes more seamless.
I like when you said that with the game, you want another chance to be better at it. Same thing with traffic. After I was like, okay, someone cut me so that I can keep calm and not road rage on this.
Yeah.
And, it becomes, everything's gamified, but it works because that's how our brain works, right? It gives you shots of dopamine when you're able to achieve something.
And I think that's awesome. That's a great thing to say, like the dopamine, because a lot of the times, like you said, we very rarely actually address our issues or the things that come up and arise, things that remind us of deficiency or anger or any of that arousal bracket of your emotion chart. And so this gamification allows us to get excited about addressing it, because addressing it, yes, there may be discomfort, but it's nothing in comparison to, cutting the cord of that discomfort finally, and having, because emotions, as we've discussed many times, are these toxic thoughts. They don't just, when we stop thinking about them or sweep them under the rug, they don't just go away. They occupy this mental real estate that continues to badger and grow upon itself. And it's just so interesting that the way you the way you add gamification to it. Absolutely. Because then it lets us not take ourselves too seriously.
Yeah. And the other thing is, I have one patient who also had road rage, and we did this. I had him do heart focused breathing in traffic. And he, I asked him, what does it gain you to be going after these people who cut you? And he's like, I get home. He did the techniques, and when we followed up, he was like, oh, well, I realized it gains me 5 minutes. I get home earlier 5 minutes, weaving through traffic. But when I get home, I'm all worked up, and I'm drained, and I'm in this state of F traffic and F these drivers. But when he started doing the technique, he got home later, not that much later, but he was in a state where he was, ready to interact with his family. Not snapping at his kids. So, gamify it, but also I want people to see the benefits of it.
Absolutely. I think it's, a lot of times people have this excuse, and I'm super guilty of this for however many years, this excuse of, oh, I don't have time for this practice. I'm too busy for this practice. As we mentioned before, it's like saying, you're driving on the road and you're running out of gas and you're too busy to stop for gas. Speed up, it's busy to stop to refuel. But well, I have kids. I have to spend time for my kids and my job. Spending, like you said, just a few minutes a day, grounding yourself and bringing yourself back to that source, that baseline, that sense of calm, that higher frequency of thinking. taking that 5 minutes for yourself isn't a selfish thing to do. I think it's one of the most selfless things you can do, because how can you possibly be in a condition to give love or to be there for someone when you can't, when, you don't have yourself together, and that affects, our entire environment, and that's just not relationships, but our productivity and everything else.
I just want to say something with, like, one of the things I like with heart math is because it's not a meditation practice that you need to, find a quiet place and be by yourself. It's simple breathing techniques. You can basically do them anywhere. You can do them in the bathroom. If you take every time you go to the bathroom, while you're peeing, do a couple of heart focused breaths. Like every moment in the day, we're breathing. That's what I tell my patients is we're breathing anyway. So every single breath is an opportunity to retrain to retrain your stressful mind and to retrain the way you breathe. I wanted to share something. Gosh, you were saying something and I thought of something, but it flew away now.
It flew away.
Sorry. Oh, okay, I remember. You were saying it affects our environment. So there's something I want to share. I don't know how much time we've gone over time, but good. The heart is an electrical organ, right? It generates electricity, and we know that from the ECG, right? And anything that produces electricity produces a magnetic field. So our heart actually has an electromagnetic field, which right now they can measure it at about 3 feet away from the heart and 360 all around. And electromagnetic fields basically transmit information, right? The same way our cell phones, and it's all EMF, all of these digital things. And what we are broadcasting out through that heart's electromagnetic field is basically our emotions. Our heart rhythm is broadcasted through that field, which is why when you come into a room and people are fighting and they suddenly shut up, you can feel that tension, right? Because our heart's fields interact with each other. And like during the earlier part of the lockdown, and I wanted, it's just like, hey, I finally have all the time I want because there isn't really work and we're stuck at home, and I can study everything I want to study and watch all the online whatever. And I just couldn't get myself to do it. I was just feeling like you were saying meh, and I couldn't understand why I was feeling that way. And my best friend reminded me, like, hey, you're saying that the heart's field affects, and everyone's heart field is currently in a state of meh, and then fear and anxiety and such. And you're picking up on that. It's like, pretty much, yes.
It's yeah, go ahead.
So that's another way that if you shift into a coherent rhythm, I want to get this out there, then the information that you're broadcasting out is affecting others, number one. And here's an interesting thing. It's also sending information to your cells, right? So our body right now, we know, communicates through neurotransmitters and hormones and all of these different chemical substances. But sooner or later, the research is going to come out there. I'm sure it's already out there. I just haven't encountered it. That these electromagnetic fields are also ways that our body communicates. So our heart can be sending information to the rest of our cells. So again, our emotions affect what that information is, which is why people are always always angry. In traditional Chinese medicine, they say people are always angry tend to have diseases of the liver. And sure enough, people who have like liver cirrhosis, they have short tempers.
Yes.
So there's some connection there. And on the other hand, happy people are healthier and they tend to live longer. And there's also that connection there.
Absolutely. And they've also been able to prove, the whole body-brain barrier, the inflammation in the brain can be directly correlated to inflammation in the body and vice versa. And And so this idea of, oh, you know, my mental health is completely different, or my physical health, and that we've compartmentalized our well-being into these different sections. But as you know, the truth is, and that's something that we really want to make aware in our community here with Trifactor Engage, is that all of these parts of us work together as an ecosystem, as in our engine, and where one fails, the entire system collapses. As Dr. Eca, you just mentioned, you know, how your heart has so much power in the way that it influences the impressions that it makes on our body, and vice versa as well.
Yeah.
And now that we can understand the holistic way that this ecosystem operates from, we can begin to, one, not take it personally when we experience, you know, this chaos. That is really probably one of the first things, like to not take it personally. And two, to be able to actually, okay, to take ownership. At the end of the day, it's always about taking ownership and initiative. It's one thing to understand the data, and the other thing to actually put it into practice. And so with two simple practices that you've given us, I think you had one more, didn't you?
So let's see, heart focused breathing, which is like just the simplest,
yes,
the depletion to renewal grid. So that's a framework, but that's also like a biofeedback that you could use. Let me
yes,
just
please
share that again. So if you use this to plot, like, you know, let's say at the end of the week, just plot where you've been or what you've been feeling, you know, over the course of a week. And if you notice that you're writing a lot of emotions that you've been spending in this upper left hand of the grid, then you know that you're draining energy. You're kind of just, the wear and tear on your body is a lot. And then as you practice the techniques, for example, we did heart focused breathing and then quick coherence, which is activating or renewing emotion.
Yes.
And over time, if you keep doing this, you'll notice that, you know, maybe you're not spending so much time in the upper left hand of this grid, and you're spending more time in the lower left. And then you're starting to spend more time on the right, because you're starting to, you know, be able to generate this renewing emotion. So that's one way that you can use this, just to kind of track your progress. You can also use this in the moment, just figuring out, okay, I'm highly aroused and I'm depleting my energy, but let me just, you know, bring down the arousal with, let's say, heart focused breathing.
Absolutely.
And then with practice, you can even, okay, let me try quick coherence and actually shift from a depleting emotion to a renewing one. I guess one other thing I want to share with the power of neutral. So it's not a whole technique, but just like the first step of it. But getting to neutral, it's like you kind of take an inner weather report. So when you're feeling whatever emotion that is, you kind of say, okay, is it, you know, it's stormy right now, or it's cloudy, or it's really windy, or whatever that weather is. And then just recognize that, just like weather, emotions pass. And you have a choice of, you know, if it's raining really hard, go out in the rain and get really soaked and get, you know, battered by the wind, or just take shelter under a tree and just kind of wait it out. That, to me anyway, that's what works for me in trying to get neutral. Is just taking that, okay, right now I'm feeling it's stormy, or it's cloudy, or thunderstorm, whatever. And then just kind of do the heart focused breathing and kind of say, okay, I'll just let it be. You know, I'm not going to deny it. I'm not going to say it's not raining.
Yes.
It is. I'm feeling this. But again, like you're saying, we're not our emotions.
Yes.
And I will let myself feel it, but I will let it pass, because it's not going to do me any good to kind of just
absolutely. I
wallow
think
in it.
It's just like, you know, there's a study of science of positive emotions with positive psychology, and science of broadening and building human emotions, how you can broaden and build negative emotion by engaging in it. And, you know, you doing that, you know, that we've all done it, where we get lost.
We're experts in that.
And we start like, oh, what if this happens? What if this happens? Before you know it, like there's like a fire here. We don't even notice. We're out of the present. In our heads, we're like, oh, it's going to be terrible next 6 months. and we get into this without even like, we think that we're in control, but we get swept away. And as you said, you know, I love that we can have these interventions and these practical, very practical tools. And it's very, very simple, almost so simple that it would turn a lot of people away, because surely it cannot, but just because it's simple, it doesn't mean it's easy.
Yes.
And again, with the practice, I think it's something that we, you know, as a community that we can, I hope that you guys will be able to share with us, you know, oh, today I you know, was looking through social media and noticed that this person was doing this, which is really frustrating and irresponsible. And I noticed myself getting swept away, but I stopped and I did my heart focused breathing, and I allowed myself to believe, you know, nothing's permanent, and allowed it to let it pass. And I didn't engage. So we would love to hear about these kinds of stories from you guys, because they're not boring stories. At the end of the day, these little stories, these little moments of practicing, those are the little wins. Those are the little steps. The 1 minute of practice that Dr. Eca was talking about. That is what, and if you do those consistently, that's all you really need to do, because you will continue to that momentum will take care of itself. So just to recap, super insightful stuff, a lot of jam-packed information here. So if you guys have any questions, please make sure that you send us a message, and if you want to share your experience, send us that as well. And if you want to learn a little bit more, I always say this, we create content not for our amusement, we create content for you. So we want to know what you want to know. So as we learned, coping with stress is a skill. It's not something that we're just born with. You see some people who are just like always happy. Why can't I be like that? We have a decision in everything. At the end of the day, our freedom means we have discipline and we take ownership of the choices that we make. So let's choose to cope with it with these strategies together. We learned that emotions are a physical thing. They're not just, something that we experience or that we just
in the mind.
Yeah.
Not just in the mind.
Yes.
In the body.
And as a result, because it's in the body, then we can use the body to manipulate or to adjust our emotions. And then we learn that our heart is so powerful and it influences so much that it actually transmits more information to the brain than the other way around. And as we're learning,
and it's broadcasting information to the environment.
Yes. So we have to be mindful of it's also a responsibility that we have, not only to ourselves, but like Oprah Winfrey has this big sign before you enter, the stage or a meeting. It says, "Be mindful of the energy that you bring into this room," and that really helps me, because even when I'm feeling, distressed, and I can just remind myself, if I see that text, be mindful of the energy that you bring into the room. It reminds us that we actually do have a choice. If we feel like we don't have a choice because we're being swept away, Dr. Eca just gave us an easy choice to make. Maybe not a choice to turn it off, but a choice to step back, wait for it to pass, to breathe. We all know how to breathe. Now let's just breathe intentionally. So quickly, Dr. Eca, the 3 simple tools and techniques that we can take home: depletion to renewal grid, or that inner weather report.
Yes, which you can use as a biofeedback, and just again, a framework for looking at emotions and then intelligently managing or regulating those emotions.
And I love that, because it's like a journal. When when you have a journal and you basically become accountable to what you're feeling, and when you can pinpoint it and make yourself aware of it, and you're able to track it, then you can measure it, and what gets measured gets optimized.
And then also that's a way that, because again, like you mentioned, the breathing techniques are very simple, and you might feel like, hey, nothing's happening, because the improvements can be very gradual, that you don't notice that they've changed. But if you're tracking it this way, you can, oh, look, I'm experiencing more of the renewing or positive emotions. So heart-focused breathing, which is just focusing in the area of your heart and imagining your breath coming into and out from your heart area. Then quick coherence is doing heart-focused breathing and then making a sincere attempt to feel a renewing emotion. I want to keep emphasizing feel a renewing emotion. We all know how to think positive, so let's take it a step further in the feeling. I think that those are I mentioned the power of neutral. What else?
What I want to just say about that real quick, and share about one of the experiences that we had together. So the first time that Dr. Eca and I came together in meeting for this workshop, we had a lot of issues with we had technical difficulties.
I had very bad internet connection.
Yeah. And
very
so
bad.
getting cut in and out of this Zoom call, which I'm sure was, was so frustrating. And so she was sharing with us, and I was so grateful for her sharing her vulnerability. She was sharing, that, she was struggling, that her heart, her heart rate was irregular, that, she was palpitating, and she, her thoughts were rampant. And then she was able to right then and there, show us the measuring system to show us her heart rate variability. It was just all over the place, and very, very little variability. And then we were able to do this practice, the quick coherence test. Well, first, we were able to focus our heart and our breathing towards our heart, and we did the quick coherence technique. And we were able to also practice what it was like to generate positive electromagnetic waves towards Dr. Eca. And then you can actually see, and I have it somewhere here, I'm going to publish it, that I took screenshots, and you can see how major the differences was between the two the two graphs that she showed. And it was,
I have it. I'll show you.
You have it. Oh, fantastic.
Here. All over the place, and then we did the breathing technique. So that's the shift in the heart rhythm with simple breathing.
So as Dr. Eca said, we all breathe anyway, and so we might as well breathe intentionally. And whatever we're doing when we're breathing, or if we still don't have time to breathe intentionally because we're thinking about other thoughts, well, one of the best things that we can do for our stress is actually bring ourselves back into the present. And breathing with heart math helps us do that. Awesome. Dr. Eca, thank you so much for taking the time. This has been so fruitful, and I really do hope that this information touches someone out there and they're able to bring it into their practice, because at the end of the day, when we put our attention to our well-being, it's the most important thing. It's what fuels everything we could possibly want out of life. But our well-being is also, as we said, what is responsible for affecting the different people in our lives, our environment, and we have to be responsible for that energy, for that well-being that we bring into the world. And so, Dr. Eca, I want to thank you so much. Do you have any parting words for our participants, or anything you want to leave us with?
I'm good.
I think I basically drew all the information.
No, there's more. This is so scratching the surface, really.
It is, and it's a lot.
But it's been an hour and a half. But I run whole day workshops on this, so this is just scratching the surface. Even the whole day workshop is scratching the surface. But
so how can they get in touch with you,
Dr. with it?
If you want to dive further into this particular part of the practice?
You can contact me via email. So I do offer online coaching sessions for heart math. So my email is, you're gonna put it in the
yes,
the
I'll
link?
put it on the group.
Okay, so just put it in the.
Perfect. So Dr. Eca is going to send me her email. I'm going to be able to put that in the, if you see the message board right underneath this podcast, then we'll be able to touch with Dr. Eca.
It's basically just Eca Lorenzo, that's my name, .md@gmail.com.
Eca Lorenzo .md@gmail.com.
Yeah.
Excellent.
So
fantastic.
If anyone wants one-on-one coaching, or I do group coaching as well to teach heart math. So
excellent. Thank you so much, Dr. Eca. We really appreciate it. And looking forward to, we're going to show your these practices to work Breakthrough in Action. Guys, once again, Breakthrough in Action, this workshop series is going to have a lot of these different practices, including Dr. Eca's instructions. And so we hope you guys will sign up. It's 100% free. At the end of the day, regardless of what degree we're experiencing COVID, we could all use in our everyday living, in our lifestyle, in our well-being, different interventions and techniques to boost our heart rate variability, to boost our well-being, our mental, physical, emotional, and to also boost our community support system. So guys, make sure that you join us at trifactor.asia/breakthrough to sign up for this free workshop. Thanks again so much,
Thank
Dr.
you. Thank you for my first podcast and making it
awesome. I'm
traumatizing.
so honored. Have a beautiful rest of your week, Dr. Eca.
You
Till the next time, guys. Have a beautiful
Thank you.
one. Bye.
Bye-bye.